Good evening, everybody, and this is Tara speaking with my fireside chat this evening. I hope you're all well, and as I say, I hope you enjoyed the game drive earlier. It certainly seemed quite an exciting one. So just with my fireside chat, I hope some of you were able to join me on my other fireside chat with my very special guest here, Graham Cook. For those of you who did miss the first fireside chat with him, just to fill you in on a bit of background, Graham has been here for quite a long time now here in Juma and been doing research on the baboons, the troop that you see quite regularly on Game Drive. Now he's been nicknaming them the Gowrie Gang, which is, I think, quite an apt name for them. So just been doing research on them and getting quite close to the baboons, and they've actually accepted him into the baboon troop. And I'm sure we'll be able to just discuss that a little bit more detail for those of you who did miss the first one. But we've had quite an interesting period. We've actually been seeing a few changes in the group, and I just asked Graham to maybe come on and explain to us what's been going on, because obviously we've seen a few baboons limping, and there's been a lot of politics that I've been getting from Graham in the past few weeks as well. So it'd be quite interesting to hear firsthand what's actually been going on. So Graham, if I can just say thank you very much for joining me this evening, and if you can just maybe just run through with us. You said there was it 15, 16 in the troop now?
Yeah, it's been bouncing between. Well, the last time since we last spoke, it's been shifting between 15 and yeah, more or less about 15, 16, sometimes 17. But I also could have been counting wrong. But usually there's about 15, and it has bounced up and down. But there's with the arrival of the new males, which happened probably what almost a month ago, then that's when I actually started noticing there were more males arriving, because I think the last time we spoke, Tawny was in charge of the troop. And shortly after that, he actually got he had a fight with the newcomer Darth Vader, obviously as some of the people know. And then Tawny held him off for the first fight that they had, and then he actually came back, had another fight with Tawny, and then took over the troop. But since his takeover, things have been really, they've just been going completely crazy, because when I arrived there, when you get familiar with him, I picked up there was a new guy hanging around that I hadn't seen before. And this was shortly afterwards, after the whole skirmish took place between the two. And I think Barry, if I'm not mistaken, was the first guy to pitch up on the scene, and which was quite amazing. And he basically just appeared I don't know where they come from or which troops they move in here from, but it just got quite amazing. So that was, for a start, was quite an amazing issue, that one baboon had arrived, and then within 2 days, 3 days, there was another male who pitched up on the scene, whose name was Wombat. I've called him Wombat. He's got these weird, funny ears. He looks like a bit of a character, and he's got a little bit of a milkiness in his right eye, so it's easy to identify. And then shortly after Wombat appeared, there was another guy who pitched up on the scene, and who I called Eddie. And he's a bit of a... They're all completely different characters, which is quite fascinating to me, because if I go back to Darth Vader, and beginning with him, because when he took over the troop, you expect a new baboon like Tawny started off with me, where he would absolutely freak out that there was a human with the troop, and then use me as a political gain and try and gain his status within the troop as a newcomer, kind of alerting everybody to danger, which clearly was me, very threatening. But with Darth Vader, it wasn't like that. It was completely different. I could literally drive within 3 meters, park 4 meters away from him, and he was just a completely different character. And so that was quite fascinating, that he just kind of took in, because I don't think most of these baboons would have had a close experience with people, or if they have it, most of the time it can be quite negative.
Yeah, I bet, unfortunately. And it's been quite interesting for us to obviously follow it. And I obviously misunderstood, because I've been thinking that Tankman was actually the leader, but obviously he's not. Where does Tankman actually fit into it? Because he was obviously the one that you said that liked the tanks, the green tanks by Yuri's house, and he used to play on them a lot. So that's where he got his name from. But how does he actually fit into that then?
Okay, well, Tankman, I don't know. He's to me, he's like a genius diplomat, where he plays his game, because when Darth Vader kind of took over the troop and kicked Tawny out after when he was basically in charge. Tawny still hung around and tailed the troop very closely and actually in close proximity to the troop. So he was almost like there as a presence, and they used each other's presence as a subtle, just a subtle statement that I'm here kind of thing, you haven't kind of got rid of me. So, but what I noticed the one occasion that when Darth Vader got irritated with Tawny's presence, he went for him, and Tank Man tried to cut Tawny off. Now, he's he's not a physically he's a big guy, but he's not physically capable of fighting. He's messed up. He's got an injured back leg, and I'm not sure how that happened. But when he raced off to cut Tawny's escape route off, um, only when he got closer did he realize, okay, this baboon's a hell of a lot bigger than me, and best I back off. But I think the where he's a genius, I think, it was just a simple act of I'm here to assist you if you need me, that kind of keeps him in kind of the play of things, because and he kind of aligns himself with with new males that have taken over. I've seen him kind of working them out, sitting there. He always stands back for a long time, assesses the situation, kind of gets a feel for the guy, and then slowly kind of breaks the barriers down.
So he was one of the first ones to accept you in that way as well, hey? He kind of allowed you to get closer to the group than maybe Tawny did, hey? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I got a nice history with the tank. I mean, because he was when he was a kid, yeah, a little bit older than Gordy. He was one of the first to really kind of sussed me out and trusted me. I mean, he's still wary, and but he kind of we did get quite close to each other in the beginning days. And then obviously as his position changes within the troop and his leadership roles, he has distanced himself, and he's I think he's just got other issues on his mind because he's in the middle. He's not powerful enough to actually take over. So he's actually got to use his head a lot more than actually try and align himself with certain power figures in the troop to actually make sure that for one, he doesn't have to run off, because I don't think he'll ever take over his own troop. I mean, you can never really say never, but it doesn't look good for him as an individual male, because that's what, well, according to the books, is males born into troops will eventually, once they get older enough and big enough, they'll leave those troops and then they'll go and look for other troops and there's a lot of factors that come into play, and again, politics, but the general rule of thumb is they say that when a male tries to get into a new troop, he has to usually strike up a relationship with a high-ranking female, because once he strikes up a relationship with a high-ranking female, he's kind of in with the top echelon, and then he's got a stepping stone. And the girls have a lot of power to play, but with this troop, the dynamics have completely gone on a whirlwind, because they've shrunk in number, and that everything's condensed into like these crazy little pockets of relationships, which I've just never seen before.
I must admit, when you were telling me that the other day, it was quite interesting because obviously the normal setup. Well, if you can tell us the normal setup of baboon, because obviously having just the couples you say is very unusual. So what is the usual setup of a baboon troop, and how many?
Okay, well, the normal structure of let's call it a stable baboon troop, the average baboon family, shall we say, and the numbers can vary. I mean, they can range, well, take 14 right up to 100 plus sometimes in some cases. But usually you'll get a dominant structure within the males. The males will have their groups of females surrounding them, and that's structures called a ligacy. And so it's quite an interesting structure, and it sounds very simple and very basic, but it's a lot more complicated than that, because different males, each of them are as unique as people are. I mean, people kind of tend to forget that animals are unique as much as we're unique within ourselves. And if males take over, like Tank Man, for instance, he's been excellent and generous and like really playful and looks after the children well. So he's favored by a lot of the females. But I've seen one of the new boys, Barry, and Wombat actually initially, he also started throwing his weight around. and threatening the children. So if he took over like a kind of in a bigger troop, for instance, and the females didn't like that behavior, the girls are going to gang up on him and they're going to kick him out. So it's strictly not a male world out there for them. So that's where it gets pretty fascinating. And now that the troops shrunk in number since they split, um, and all the boys that have hooked up, well, it basically ended up in couples where you had Darth Vader, he was hooked up with Shirley Hurley, and well, after that, I think it was Barry was hooked up with LB, and Eddie, which was a good match, was hooked up with Mrs. Psycho because they were the the grey figures in the background.
Sorry, that just really cracks me up, Mrs. Psycho, and just the reason why she's called Mrs. Psycho is just obviously her behavior towards you to begin with, wasn't it?
She's just a fascinating character. I mean, she has her moments where she seems some days she's actually fine with me, and then other days she just gets this like lunatic stare at me. I'm not sure if she's eating some special herbs out there or something, but she just gets a wild look in her eyes that I think that's what makes her, because there's a lot going on in her head when she looks at you, and then as I say, some days she's completely relaxed, and other days she'll look at you like you're about to attack her or something, and she won't trust you completely. And Eddie is the same kind of thing, and I mean, I see it with some of my friends. I actually can relate to baboon behavior to some couples because I think certain traits attract, and it actually is playing forth in the troop because I mean, they're actually a perfect couple in my eyes.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it, hey. And how about the little ones? How are they progressing? Because we have, I can't remember which one it was that we saw, but there was one that was climbing the marula tree, and on one of the Safari TV diaries, we had it sort of climbing up and then falling off and then climbing again, and now they seem to be getting a lot stronger. How are they progressing, and sort of roughly what ages are them?
No, I mean they actually fine because all the kids they're living under the social structure, the social radar, so to speak. So they're not really affected. Although the only time they're going to get, they do. I've seen um, Barry harass. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Lucy that Barry actually harassed the kids, and it was quite an interesting thing because it's the only time I've actually seen Tankman physically go for another baboon. And as soon as he saw the kids taking flack from this guy, he actually went for him. I mean, not that he could actually do anything to him, but he actually pushed him off, and because he trapped I think it was if it Lucy, he trapped her up a small bush, and Tankman was in the vicinity with the other kids, and he saw this, and he came bolting over straight away, and basically forced him off the baby, and which was interesting again because that day, Wombat kind of was throwing his weight around, and then shortly after that, which people might know from following it on Facebook, is that Darth Vader then disappeared out the troop and out of the equation. So I thought he'd been pressured out by Barry and Wombat because they seem to be more dominant than Eddie. Eddie, he's a little shady dude in the back, and the other two they're quite big boys, but it just didn't make sense because Darth Vader he's a really intense male, and it was just weird that he actually got pushed out of the equation for a while, and then a couple of days ago when I was doing a safari, I actually bumped into the troop, just sneak in and check up on how they're doing, and Darth Vader was back with them. So it just gets mind-blowing.
So just to sort of try and keep up with obviously the politics. So you've got the three baboons sort of coming in and sort of being involved in the troop. So Darth Vader was he the leader of the group at that stage, and then he got pushed out, and then he's come back in. Is that how I understand it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, because don't worry, I was struggling to understand it, but that's what seems because when Tankman was in charge before, we have to go back. When Tankman was in charge, he only got left in charge because he was the only big male there. So what I go on is if to me who's the male leader, he'll choose because basically he's in charge of security of the troops, so to speak. So he'll kind of determine direction, movement, where they're going to go, forage or whatever the case may be, and he's the one who's going to call the shots as to who's going to be looking out for whatever's going on. So Tankman took that role up. Tawny arrived, then Tawny kind of took that role over. It was a slow process, but it went on for about 2, 3 weeks. Then Tawny kind of ruled there, and he started choosing directions and what have you. But I think what I think is that he's new to the area. He doesn't know it, so he can't be familiar with all the best foraging, feeding spots, and where the food's available. So to a degree, that gives Tankman leverage again, and he'll use it. And then the fight between Darth Vader and Tawny happened, and then Tawny actually got really badly bitten. So anybody who watches it, if he got bitten badly on the left wrist, which I think is quite a severe injury because he actually walks on his knuckles, gorilla style. And I've looked at stills photographs that I've taken close up, and he's worn all the skin off his left knuckle. So I think the tendons actually got severely damaged there. But then Darth Vader took that role over where he would be in charge. And then, of course, everything went haywire when Barry pitched up. And then after that, Wombat pitched up. And then Eddie pitched up. And then now it's just who's going to lead it. And actually, a lot of the girls now will pick the direction. And I think Shirley Hurley, a lot of the time in the mornings when I go with them, she actually determines, okay, we'll go this way. And then most of the troop will follow. But then everything can change because some couples will be 200 meters away and this male's got an issue with that male being too close to that one, and so you actually sit there and you can't be, I wish I could be clone myself because you want to be here, you want to be there, and you want to see what's going on, but it just gets quite difficult to actually work out.
For sure. Hey. I must admit, that's one thing that we realized um, on two dams, and they were obviously foraging, and then we went a bit further along, and it must have been Tawny that we saw. I wasn't too sure who it was. I thought it might have been Darth Vader. So it turned out to be Tawny, and he was sort of in the tree, and he kind of looked like he was getting fairly used to us, but there was a couple of others with him. But obviously that's what's been going on then. So it's quite interesting, obviously, just to get that point of view and what's been going on. But well, what would you like to see happen? Who would you like to see sort of be the leader? Who do you think would be a good leader in your view?
Well, if I could shoot back 20 million years and become a baby, 20,000 rather, sorry. For me, I don't actually. I have my favorite individuals, and I just probably because they relate to a character within me, and it's difficult sometimes just to sit back and I mean I've got to sit back and just watch things unfold because even if I wanted somebody to be in charge, I'm not going to try and influence it, and you can't influence, so you just have to enjoy the ride. I mean, I enjoyed Darth Vader, and I'm glad to actually see he's back in there, and the reason why I enjoy him because usually what's happened in the past when a new male's over the troop or arrived in the troop, then I've got to kind of restructure a whole relationship with him and his presence can sometimes unnerve the rest of the troop to an extent where I've kind of got to play his cards right through a stage before he'll actually settle with me, and then the troop kind of calms down a bit. But recently I've noticed that they've actually they don't worry about that anymore. It's which was funny with Tawny when he first pitched up because, as I say, he hit the roof and flat panicked about me, but the troop didn't react to that. They couldn't see what the problem was, which was great. But I like Darth Vader because of that. And interestingly enough, Barry was pretty much the same. He was also incredibly easy going and easy to approach. Um, and the same was with Wombat. Wombat was also very, very confident with me, and even more so than Barry. I mean, he's a bit of a weird creature, and so I think if I had to choose one that I wouldn't like, it'd probably be Barry.
Oh, shame. I think we'll definitely have to try and study the pictures and see if we can ID them on Drive and just say, right, that's Barry there. But yeah. So how's it going? Have the troop allowed you to get closer than when we last spoke about a month ago, or is it still fairly the same distance? And has any of the baboons actually come up to you yet to try and groom you yet, or will we be hearing you sort of shouting it from the rooftops if that happens?
um, you probably would. No, I mean the troop when you're with the females, they're used to me. The kids are used to me. tank man's used to me. I mean, so the majority of the baboons are actually fine with me because we've got a long history. It's just, and the new males are also kind of used to me. It's just Eddie and Mrs. Psycho, and they're basically the only ones who kind of have their moments. But that's fine because I never pressure them. I mean, a lot of the time, I prefer to position myself where they actually come to me rather than me go to them. And it's always worked like that because I think that it's a relationship basically that's based on trust. And I think the only way you're going to get that with an animal is it must be able to move around you without you, because when you're in one position, the animal's moving around you, the animal's in control. If you're moving around, the animal's not sure what you're up to, and that creates more problems and more stress and gives them more to worry about. And obviously it makes me less trustworthy to them. So the general troop's actually fine with me, and it's just every now and again when something happens. Like I was out the other day when I came back from doing safari, and I heard one of the baboons. I'd been looking for the troop, and seen that I knew they were here. So I went out during the day between the drives looking for them, and I only found Wombat alone, and he was calling a lot, looking for the troop. You could see he was intensely listening to the area and listening. But I noticed he had a real bad gash on his back left leg. So there's been politics and again, but you see, I don't know what's going on, and so I'm not sure if that's a wound from Tankman coming in and Darth Vader coming in and reassessing his dominance or establishing his dominance back again, and if there was an issue. I mean, I can't really say, but what I found, it's just an interesting place for there to be I don't think it's an unusual place for another baboon to inflict on another male. Normally it's head, chest, and forearm area. So, but yeah, the troop as a whole is great because I'm in with them, so that's fun.
Now, you're just saying, because obviously we go out every day on drives, and quite often we do see the baboons, and they're usually around the Quarantine or Gowrie area. And you said you haven't seen them for a few days now. Where is it they actually go to?
They they go well, it's quite interesting because I know their movement so well now that if they pick one road and they start heading south, then they usually, I know pretty much for a fact that they will go off onto another property which is just south of Juma, so close to where Mark had the lions, I think it was last night. They actually crossed literally where he was, and they head off into that property. And I know there's another camp there, and then they can spend sometimes one night, 2 nights there. Sometimes they'll come back in the same day. I mean, they have actually disappeared before for a month, over a month. But their movements have seemed to shrunk because they followed the troop right up onto the Manueledi boundary, which is a fair distance from here. And then recently, they actually 2 or 3 days ago, they went west up towards the gate, which they haven't done for a long time. And so I think the dynamics and the politics seems to all change and evolve and revolve around where they're actually going now, because they've a lot of the time, thank goodness, they've been based here, so I've been able to keep in touch with them. But I'm hoping like crazy that they'll come back tomorrow.
Now, just on it, obviously we're going into winter, and you were saying to me, obviously the guari bushes are dying back. What sort of foods are they going to start looking for now? Do you have an idea, obviously from just a few years that you've been following them? Is there anything in particular this time of year that they are going to be searching for, or insects or anything like that that they really focus on now?
Um, yeah, they do. Well, obviously they're going to capitalize on all the fruit that's available seasonally. So now, like the guarri bushes are moving out, and it was quite interesting the other day because it was the day they actually went across the boundary, and I was with them, and they kind of headed into some pretty thick stuff, and I